Previously on Farscape.
We were trying to create a universe that had its own cultural flavor, that had an energy and a wildness to it that was very uniquely this show.
Farscape was like an opera. It was a marriage of science, art, and technology, and good old-fashioned entertainment.
We wanted to make sure that when you turn to Farscape, in 15 seconds, it not only did you know it was Farscape, but you could never have found those 15 seconds in any other TV show on the air.
One of the reasons it stood out from the very beginning is that it was playful and mature at the same time.
Farscape's agenda from the beginning was let's get film people to make television.
It looked different and it acted different. Certain episodes to me were more like a graphic novel than you had ever seen on television before. Really a strong sense of the visual in terms of the makeup and the characters and the sets and everything that was going on there. It was a great show to watch.
What I wanted us to do was I wanted to be able to bring to television some of the
They were really anxious to keep up what they're famous for, which is really exotic, unusual material.
Pitching Farscape was a lot of fun for a lot of writers that came in, because it was the kind of room where people would grab an idea and run with it.
The strangest thing in the writer's room was just how incredibly open we were to just the wildest ideas, because we wanted to do that. And I always try to write as extreme as possible. And you don't always get that opportunity, or rarely get that opportunity in television. And this was an opportunity for us to really just get as extreme as possible.
My attitude was everybody should have their say. And I would say to people, scare me. Try to pitch me something that scares me to my core. I want to resist it. I want to be so afraid. But then I want you to convince me. And then I want you to not let us down and execute it.
It was very rare to have that much creative freedom, and I credit Rock and David for wanting to go there and wanting to open this up and not be the 1000th science fiction show on television and not be aware of it.
The storylines, the whole of, Farscape, they had these mad storylines that would start in the middle of they were the first people to do this. Each episode would start in the middle of this insane battle. It didn't make any sense. And then the storylines would be revealed bit by bit by bit by...
That ultimately did also define the show, and really is why Rockne is the creator of Farscape. One was he wanted to bring one of us into space. He wanted to bring a typical Earthling
in space. We don't want the captain. What we want is the average guy that represents the audience.
When we began, I know Rock and David, they sort of knew what the show was. They knew that at core it was the love story between Crichton and Aeryn. That they knew from day one.
His idea that the Aeryn Crichton romance should be the best romance we've ever seen on television. That was kind of important to him, which is a very unusual idea to bring to science fiction, to say, I want the most wonderful love affair here. Making it an epic love story at the center of a science fiction space opera was very important to him, and ultimately was why, to keep that love so powerful, to keep that relationship so powerful, we, as the show, needed to keep pulling them apart, so that they were always fighting to be together.
You go look at Farscape, watch 6 or 7 episodes of these two actors playing love-hate, and tell me that you don't want to see more of what they do.
That was really one of the huge strengths of the show, and why the show developed such a strong female audience as well.
We had almost 50-50 male-female viewers, which for a science fiction show at the time was almost unheard of.
Up until then, science fiction was traditionally a male audience program.
Crichton is the woman, because he is more sensitive. He's not necessarily more caring, but he is more overtly sensitive and feeling, because Aeryn is the soldier. She's the one who can kick his ass.
You always hope for chemistry between all your characters, but in particular those you were expecting to become romantic leads. But you never know. It's always pretty scary. And it just, with Ben and Claudia, it just happened. They totally got each other.
As we saw the actors relate to each other, we said, oh my God, they're like classic. They'll be able to spark off each other for 100 episodes.
And we connected so wholeheartedly in the room, something bizarre happened. And we did a great screen test together. And he was the one that said, you know, they had other choices, girls who were more attractive or whatever. And Ben said, no, Claudia's it. I want her.
The Crichton-Aeryn relationship evolved quite a bit, particularly in season 1, where they start out as basically complete enemies. She's totally suspicious of this person, as she should be. He has to realize
Sins, supposedly, in television is that you can never put your leads together. The minute you put your leads together, the show dies. Well, we put our leads together in season 1, sort of skated and danced around in season 2, then we put them absolutely together in season 3, and tore them apart, and finally put them back together again. Hollywood mythology would tell you that you can't do that because it kills the tension. And I think with Crichton and Aeryn, it's exactly the opposite. I think they were better together. I think they were, in many ways, more interesting together.
There were a couple of episodes in season 1 where things really started to change. It felt like, you know, on a cellular level, chemically, everything just started to shift, and we started to realize that we were making something different and that we had permission to make something different and edgy. We were getting a note from Bonnie Hammer at the Sci-Fi Channel saying, just make it, you know, edgier, darker, sexier, just go for it.
The first episodes were all, again, kind of searching for the absolute correct tone of the show. Obviously, in the early episodes, the actors are kind of finding themselves and also discovering just how far we can go. And there was also finding the characters. I mean, for me, in the early episodes, clearly John Crichton was the character that we all identified with, and what Ben was bringing to it just inspired us that much more. But it was really interesting to me to watch his DNA Mad Scientist, because it was the episode where everyone else was getting an opportunity to find their home. And there's this wonderful scene between Aeryn and Crichton where she says, you guys can all go home, but I don't have a home. My home was the Peacekeepers. There is no place.
To become more human, because her arc really is to go from this sort of almost robotic type character into something that we would identify with as a more well-rounded woman. So she goes,
they're given what they want. You can go home. They hold this creature down and they amputate an arm because they're so frelling selfish. Set the writers free and the directors and even the actors that we don't have to be homogenous.
One of the other things I thought that gave the show appeal certainly for the writers and for the actors was the fact that the characters weren't set in stone, that they did have journeys of their own, arcs of their own.
Just trying to get home, Annie M. Hey,
The character of Crichton, I mean, what motivates him, the essence of him, I laid in the pilot, and Ben Browder helped to inform the friendship on screen, and the kind of bromance that they developed kind of came from they're two guys who were like kind of thrown into this, and they're essentially the same age, and so even though they're wildly different species and from wildly different backgrounds, it just gelled correctly.
I loved it when Dargo would be able to be funny, because he never knew he was being funny. That was the great thing about him. He was totally stoic. Even when he would make a joke, and you would kind of look at him like, did you just make a joke? There's a scene in Mind the Baby where he and Crichton are stuck waiting for Aeryn to come back from something. And I came up with the idea, well, these two guys are sitting around bored, so they're playing rock, paper, scissors. The two of them getting into this sort of little, Abbott and Costello shtick about, what do you mean paper beats rock? That's ridiculous, and having that argument. But my favorite Dargo moment was then we come back to him later in the episode, and this was not scripted. This was something Anthony came up with. And Dargo is pretty much, he's doing rock, paper, scissors with himself, which doesn't really work. And he does, and he goes, a tie. And I always break up when I see that, because that is a very sort of Anthony-esque moment and a Dargo-esque moment at the same time.
We worked really hard throughout the first season to really try to keep the characters at odds as much as possible. But then as you get toward the end of the first season, they really are starting to bond as a family, as a group.
Zhaan came around full circle. She was selfless in the end, but she started off selfish. She had been in prison. She was a murderer.
What are you afraid of?
Take my head.
Crichton was the only person who was able to calm her and bring her back to the centre by going into a very hazardous union. Zhaan was pulled back into the centre by her family. She had a sense of family belonging. She grew to love, obviously, Moya, pilot, who's part of Moya, the crew, Crichton. She loved Crichton so much.
I got my mind right, boss. Be nice.
We will.
After Crichton was tortured, fully tortured for 2 episodes, I felt that it would be cheating to hit the reset button. Crichton grew progressively more wary, and then after torture, Crichton became unhinged. He became slightly erratic, and that you have to go there. You have to go on this journey. You have to go upriver with Crichton.
Season 2 Crichton was a tortured thing. I mean, literally, at the end of season 1, he had been tortured, and Ben was always coming to us and saying, I think this has affected John Crichton to some extent. I'm going to play it. He's going to be a different person as a result of that. We're not just going to pretend it never happened. He's not just going to go back to being the same old guy next week. We were perfectly willing to let the character go down the rabbit hole, as it were, to question his sanity. And that became kind of a major theme of season 2.
Excuse me, Captain. Duty calls.
I had not seen Scorpius. I hadn't seen a drawing until the day that Wayne showed up to shoot the scenes. The first time that I'd seen Scorpius. So Wayne walks in with his Gemp outfit on, with that pasty, translucent, cadaverous look. So Wayne walks in, and I'm basically strapped in a revolving chair, and he starts into his performance. And I thought, oh my, this is very clever. It's very clever acting, a very clever cadence that he uses.
Well, Scorpius was somebody that was in Rock's and David's minds from very early on. I remember Rock describing him as like, what if Mr. Spock were evil?
What would happen if Mr. Spock had an agenda?
And you've got this guy who's smarter than anybody else. He's really, really intelligent. He sees 4 moves ahead of anybody. Smartest guy in the room. What if he's evil?
And at the end of season 1, when Scorpius is introduced into the beginning of season 2, we start this incredible journey with these villains. Scorpius, obviously, you know, we grow to like in an odd way because he becomes so much part of Crichton in later seasons.
Scorpius was not a sociopath. He didn't murder people just because he murdered people. He had an agenda that he thought was valid and worthy, and if you really went with him and became his aide-de-camp, you would find that you started to agree with a lot of what he did. Nobody is truly a villain. They have an agenda, and if we have the time in our storytelling process, we're going to give the other side. That's the nature of what we went for in the villainy of Farscape, was you had to understand them, and you should like them all.
I mean, David Kemper was a brilliant strategist and politician in the way that he managed to manifest these really excruciatingly complicated dynamics and plot devices so that we would be on the edge of our seats when the interesting at the beginning of season 2, seeing these relationships and the dynamic and the politics and Aeryn sort of being split in 2 directions, divided loyalties perhaps.
That's basically her journey through the course of the series, is to come to grips with who she actually is, to choose who she actually wants to be. There's a line right out of the premiere where Rock has Crichton's own way.
Season 2 was just incredible for Aeryn and for me. I got so many fabulous opportunities, and I really got to explore the depths of Aeryn and find out about her background, and she just became a really interesting character to write.
Performance, when she says, "I love you" to him, it was a critical and seminal moment in the show because it made it, now we could tell the love story because the secret's out.
The death of Aeryn just seemed, I think, as a sort of, if you want to call it a natural outgrowth of where the season was heading. Basically playing the idea that Crichton's mind was being destroyed, taken over by this thing that had been put in his head, that his sanity was getting progressively worse. In David's mind, it just became, let's take this to its natural conclusion, which is he's taken over by this alien Scorpius personality. Let's turn him evil. Let's have him under control of this thing. What's the worst thing that he could possibly do? Well, killing Aeryn would be pretty bad, wouldn't it?
The guilt of killing her is a whole separate issue altogether because he knew he was out of control at that point. John was no longer in control of his actions at that point. He's responsible, so he killed her. But he got her back fairly quickly.
We knew that if we were going to bring a character back, that somebody else would have to go. One of the things on Farscape that if we had one precept, was that things should have a cost, that we didn't want to take the easy way out dramatically. If we're going to kill somebody and bring them back to life, there needs to be a cost for that. A price needs to be paid.
We just got to a place where we need to earn Aeryn's return in a big way. We couldn't just have somebody wave a magic wand and here she comes back. We needed to really pay for her return, and we did that with the loss of Zhaan, which was very painful for us.
Everybody needs to belong, and so she was ultimately like a mother. She was the mother then of Moya and Pilot and all of the life on.
Makes death real in terms of the series, which raises the stakes. One of the great problems of science fiction is that no one ever dies. Well, Zhaan died, Dargo died, John died, and these deaths are permanent.
Leaving was the hardest thing that I could do. You're not supposed to take your character home with you. You're supposed to leave your character in the makeup room at the end of the day and then go home and be yourself. But because when I used to go home, I was bald. I was still Zhaan. I used to take my character very, very seriously. And so it was particularly hard for me to walk away from her. But it was self-preservation, as Zhaan had to remove herself in order for everyone else to live. Virginia had to remove herself from Zhaan so that Virginia could live. I got shingles and all kinds of things, and my left-hand side of my face was paralyzed. The hours were excruciating and making me ill. Also on top of that was years without hair and eyebrows. It really just starts to distort you. And a culmination of all of that meant that I had to go. None of us realized, I don't think, at the time, that Zhaan really was the sanity. And everyone, they're all criminals, crazy people, inmates, nuts.
Radiation.
Jim Henson Company Creature Shop genius of creating these extraordinary animatronic characters like no one has ever seen before.
The special effects that we had were just amazing. If you imagined that they could do it, and to be able to see talking and to see Pilot, this gigantic construct, taking up most of a room and arms and moving in all directions, it's just really amazing.
We were incredibly proud of Rigel and very proud of Pilot as well. But for the audience to buy into them as actual characters, I was very proud of the work that the writers did, and then also the voice performers and the puppet performers themselves, in really kind of in making them real. And so even though Rigel was pretty rough and tumble, certainly in the first episodes, as everybody's kind of finding their footing with him, just the nature of the strength of his personality allowed him to be real and became a real character. Pilot, same thing.
I will destroy you first.
Rigel, now.
Crichton.
Now, Rigel.
Crichton.
Rigel, now. Now, Rigel!
Take them!
It's hard to top peeing explosives in my book. It was a signifier early on of, this is not your grandfather's science fiction.
helium to me kind of introduced him in like the absolute perfect way. Just everything that he was willing to eat, and the fact that, and how often he would eat, and in terms of not gross out fun, but just his willingness to be unrelentingly self-serving, to me was just made him, a phenomenal character.
Frail gracefully. Well, if I must be imprisoned here, feed me and show me to my quarters.
Just to watch the evolution from the first season and as we got into season 4, a huge frustration for all of us, obviously, was the fact that we didn't get to go beyond the 4th season.
We knew we were not at a place where the story was finished. And of course, people could say, you could have just ended the episode 1 minute earlier, and it had the feeling of finished.
Or should we stay true to the episode and leave it just the way we'd intended it? And should we put to be continued on the end as we'd intended? We were all pretty much all of a mind that said, you know what, let's just do it the way we intended to do it.
And we could have kind of done some sort of wrap up to the series and not left it on a cliffhanger as we did.
I love you.
The writers gave the audience a really nice moment of resolution and then destroyed it.
We clearly did that as a message to the fans that we weren't ready to stop yet. It was probably a little reckless to do that.
Maybe it was reckless, but the story wasn't over. We actually, I think there was a debate as to whether we should put to be continued on the end of the miniseries.
We wanted to leave it open. We wanted it to be hopeful. This may not be the end.
It was just simply that we wanted to stay true to our storytelling throughout, and we certainly didn't want to do any sort of like rushed kind of wrap up at the end of season 4. It's quite a tribute to the honesty of the characters and the situations that we had built into it in those first 4 seasons, that it was not a difficult decision for us to say, no, we're going to end this episode as we plan to end it. And if that's the end of the series, then that's the end of the series.
What did you imagine for your life?
Service, promotion, retirement, death. You?
This is exactly what I imagined.
It was 2002 when the show was canceled, and I was aware that there were some rather unhappy campers out in internet land.
The fan outpouring of affection and of energy, and then the campaign that they put together, it blew all of us absolutely away. That it wasn't just a bunch of crazed internet people rising up saying, we want our show back.
It was the passion and the intelligence of the letter writing that caught everybody's attention. It wasn't that it was just X number of signatures on a petition. It was people writing individual letters about why this show meant something to them and why they were going to miss it so much.
Tens of thousands of people were having parties all across the country, and were doing events and things and anywhere that they could get in front of a news camera. I mean, they were doing things like, you could be watching the news anywhere in America, and there'd be a sidewalk interview, and somebody would walk into the back of the shop with a sign that said, save Farscape. You know, they figured out really just a way to get the message out there. They were pushing Sci-Fi mostly to try and get them to change their mind and to do a 5th season.
Because of the nature of the series, it wasn't the kind of show that was going to be widely and broadly popular. It just was too unusual. And so we really kind of hit a good, strong number and had clearly a very passionate and loyal audience. It wasn't building beyond.
Enough or not good enough. And there's only one kind of success, which is, did you get picked up or did you not get picked up? We got picked up. We got picked up for 88 episodes.
There can't be anything like Farscape ever again.
Pilot, is the Prowler aboard? Yes. Prepare for immediate starburst.
I mean, it was just getting the show.
Love were put into the design of each of the creatures.
If you watch Farscape, the whole catchword was hope. If you're trapped out in space, you have hope that you're going to go home. They all had hope. None of our people ever gave up hope.
It was the greatest work of art in every way. The writing, the special effects, the costuming. The acting wasn't bad, too. You know.
What it was to me was the best job of my life, the best time of my life, and the best place of my life. I will never have a better experience than I had for those 6 years.
Farscape as a personal experience was just a dream come true. And then to be surrounded by this incredible set of incredibly creative people, and it was a gas, absolute gas.